I came home with a limp and a citation. The citation was printed on thick paper with a seal pressed so hard it left a ridge I could feel with my thumb. It used words like valor and decisive action. It described wind speeds, wave height, visibility. It did not mention the sound my knee made when it twisted under the weight of another body on a wet ladder. It did not mention the moment I understood something inside my leg would not return to what it had been. The limp followed me off the plane, through the small regional airport, into the rental car, and up the white column porch of my father's house. The porch looked like it belonged on a campaign brochure. Fresh paint, railings polished to a soft shine, ferns hung in identical green arcs, spaced with deliberate symmetry. The American flag was mounted at a precise angle, forward enough to suggest movement even in still air. My father believed in presentation. He was running for mayor now. The house had become a backdrop. When I stepped onto the porch, I paused long enough to shift my weight before knocking. Not from hesitation, from calibration. Pain is manageable when it is predictable. My father opened the door before my knuckles reached the wood. He had been watching through the sidelights. "Good," he said. "You're early." He looked past me first, down the driveway, across the street, checking for witnesses. Then he looked at my face. His eyes dropped once, briefly, to the brace beneath my slacks. Not concern, assessment. Inside, the house smelled like lemon oil and something floral I did not recognize. The floors gleamed. The staircase banister had been refinished in a darker stain than I remembered. Colin stood near the base of the stairs, phone in hand, thumb moving quickly. He smiled when he saw me, but it didn't reach his eyes. "There she is," he said, "our hometown hero." I set my duffel down carefully beside the console table. The same table my grandmother used to stack church bulletins and grocery receipts. It had been sanded smooth. The old scratches were gone. "You could have waited until after tonight," Colin added. "Reporters are already circling." "I was invited," I said. He shrugged, as if that detail were negotiable. My father closed the door behind me and adjusted his cufflinks in the hallway mirror. "Tonight is important," he said, not turning around. "We need consistency." Consistency. I had been home for 4 hours when the reception began. Cars lined the street in an orderly row. The front lawn had been edged that morning. A campaign banner stood near the hedges, its colors bold and uncomplicated. Inside, the living room filled quickly. Donors, local business owners, a city councilman with careful hair, 2 reporters I recognized from high school football coverage, now holding notepads instead of cameras. Glasses clinked. Ice shifted in crystal bowls. Laughter moved through the room in controlled waves. I stood near the French doors, back straight, weight balanced evenly between both legs. Years in uniform teach you how to distribute strain so it does not show on your face. A woman with lacquered hair and a necklace too large for subtlety approached me. "You must be Abigail," she said warmly. "We're all so proud of your service." Her eyes traveled downward despite herself. The brace, the cane resting lightly against the doorframe. "And recovering so bravely," she added. I nodded once. Across the room, Colin leaned toward a group of men and lowered his voice just enough to invite curiosity. "It's been a transition," he said. "The injury was significant." One of the men glanced at me with softened eyes, the look people reserve for someone fragile. I held my glass steady. In the Coast Guard during rescue operations, you learn to read tone faster than words. The ocean changes mood before it changes shape. A shift in wind, a drop in temperature. Pressure you feel in your jaw before you see it in the sky. I felt the pressure now. My father moved through the room like he owned its current. Firm handshakes, direct eye contact, the practiced laugh that suggested humility without surrender. When he reached me, he placed a hand lightly at my elbow. "Walk with me," he murmured. I followed him into his office. The door closed. The hum of conversation dulled behind thick wood. The office had changed. My grandmother's framed embroidery was gone from the wall. In its place hung a photograph of my father shaking hands with a state senator. He did not sit. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk and removed a folder, thick and cream-colored. "Before this gets busier," he said, sliding it toward me, "we should take care of something." I remained standing. My name was printed neatly on the cover. Inside was a will. "Your grandmother's estate has been reorganized," he said. "Cleaner this way, less confusion down the road." I turned the first page slowly. The language was formal, efficient. Control of primary assets transferred to Thomas Miller and Colin Miller as co-executors. Discretionary authority over distributions. Asset management consolidated under family oversight. My portion reduced to a trust with conditional access. Oversight. "She wanted stability," my father continued, "given your circumstances." My circumstances. I reached the signature page. My grandmother's name sat at the bottom in blue ink. I had helped her fill out forms 2 years ago when arthritis made her fingers stiff. I remembered the way she pressed hard on the downstrokes, the sharp upward hook at the end of Miller, the decisive cross through the T. This signature curved differently, softer. The final line hesitated. The notary date was 3 weeks after she had already been admitted to the hospital for respiratory failure. I let the silence stretch. My father checked his watch. "Just sign and smile," he said quietly. "We'll file it Monday." Outside the office window, guests were gathering on the lawn for a photograph. The porch lights had come on. The flag lifted slightly in the evening air, caught in a breeze that hadn't been forecasted. "I'll review it," I said. His jaw tightened. "It's standard," he replied. "Don't complicate this." "I won't," I said. I closed the folder and placed it back on the desk, precisely where it had been. When we returned to the reception, Colin was mid-sentence. "She's different since the injury," he was saying. "You know how trauma affects judgment." A sympathetic murmur passed through the group. One of the reporters scribbled something. I took my place near the edge of the room and did not correct him. Volume is rarely the tool that shifts a room. The sky outside had darkened. Clouds moved in from the coast, heavy and low. Someone mentioned a tropical system pushing north faster than expected. My father laughed easily. "Just a little wind," he said. "Nothing we can't handle." A campaign volunteer hurried in from the porch, whispering about gusts picking up near the water. The ferns began to sway. Through the open doors, I could smell salt and rain. I stood still and listened. In rescue operations, the worst mistakes are made by those who believe they can outrun the weather. The first distant roll of thunder moved across the horizon, low and deliberate. Inside the house, the laughter continued. I rested my hand lightly against the back of a chair and waited for the pressure to break. The first window shattered at 8:17 p.m. Not dramatically, not in a way that invited applause or panic. Just a sharp crack from the rear of the house, followed by the distinct collapse of glass, surrendering to pressure. The band on the patio stopped mid-measure. Conversations hesitated, then resumed in lighter tones. People prefer to misinterpret the first warning. Another gust hit, harder this time. The ferns on the porch tore loose from their hooks and swung sideways, striking the columns. The campaign banner near the hedges bent inward, its metal frame shrieking against stone. Someone laughed again, but it was thinner now. My father stepped forward, raising his hand slightly. "Folks, just a squall," he said. "We're safe inside." Thunder rolled directly overhead. The lights flickered once, then the power went out. Darkness is different when it arrives in a room full of people who rely on being seen. A few phones lit up immediately, blue-white squares floating in the black. Someone knocked over a glass. Ice scattered across hardwood. Colin swore under his breath. I stayed where I was. In the Coast Guard, darkness is not an interruption. It is a variable. You account for it before it arrives. Wind forced itself through the broken rear window with a low, steady howl. Rain followed, slanting sideways into the kitchen. The smell of wet earth and salt pushed through the house, erasing lemon oil and polished wood. A woman near the fireplace said, "Should we leave?" No one answered her. My father moved toward the hallway. "Flashlights?" he called to Colin. "Garage cabinet." But Colin was already wrestling with the French doors, trying to force them closed against the pressure. The wind pushed back, deliberate and stronger than his grip. Another crash sounded from the back of the house, this time the office. I turned before anyone else did. Water was already running across the tile floor in a shallow, widening sheet. The broken kitchen window had given the storm a direct path inward. Rain struck the hardwood, darkening it in irregular blooms. Guests began gathering purses and jackets. The room shifted from curated order to urgent retreat. A reporter slipped near the entryway and caught herself against the wall. Her notepad fell, pages absorbing water instantly. "Out through the front!" someone shouted. The porch, moments ago a campaign image, now heaved under heavy gusts. The flag snapped violently against its pole. Colin managed to close one of the doors, but the other buckled inward as wind forced it open again. I moved past him without speaking and pulled it shut with both hands, bracing my weight against the frame. The brace on my leg protested, but it held. "Lock it," I said. He fumbled for the latch. The house groaned as another surge of wind struck. In the hallway, my father stood frozen outside his office. Water streamed from beneath the door. He opened it anyway. Rain had entered through the cracked office window and pooled across the floor. Papers floated against the baseboards. A desk drawer hung open, its contents spilling outward like something exposed too quickly. "God," he muttered. He stepped forward, shoes soaking instantly. Behind him, guests hurried toward the front door, abandoning small talk and unfinished drinks. The campaign volunteers tried to maintain calm, guiding people out in pairs. Lightning flashed close enough to illuminate the room in stark white relief. In that light, I saw the top desk drawer fully extended, its files swollen, edges bleeding ink. My father reached for a stack of documents and lifted them. The pages separated in his hands, signatures dissolving into blue-gray shadows. Colin appeared beside him. "We have to get this out of here," he said. But the water was rising too quickly. It seeped under the desk, around the filing cabinet, into the lower shelves where older records were stored. The careful architecture of paper, years of contracts, correspondence, revisions, softened and collapsed. I stepped into the office. "Abby, stay out of this," my father snapped. I did not answer. The storm outside intensified. Shingles tore loose from somewhere above. A branch struck the side of the house with a violent crack. I moved toward the far wall where a narrow cabinet stood partially concealed behind a campaign poster that had fallen askew. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling onto the rug beneath it. The cabinet door was swollen, but not yet compromised. I crouched slowly, steadying myself against the wall, and pulled. It resisted once, then opened. Inside, shoved behind a stack of outdated financial statements, was a small metal lockbox. Old, scratched along the edges, the kind my grandmother favored for important papers. It had not been moved in years. Dust clung to its hinges in a dry line just above the rising water. I lifted it carefully. "Leave that," Colin said sharply. I stood. The box was heavier than it looked. Water had reached the legs of the desk now. The lower drawers were submerged. My father stared at the disintegrating papers in his hands. The ink continued to bleed, seals separating from the page. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Guests were gone. The house no longer held an audience, only witnesses. I stepped back into the hallway with the lockbox against my chest. No one tried to stop me. In storms, priorities reveal themselves quickly. Image becomes secondary to survival. The lights remained out. The only illumination came from lightning and the intermittent glow of phones. I carried the box upstairs, away from the water. Behind me, the office continued to flood. Downstairs, the will my father had asked me to sign dissolved quietly into gray water. I did not open the lockbox yet. Timing still mattered. The storm would finish what it had started. And when the power returned, so would the questions. The storm moved north before dawn. By morning, the house smelled like soaked wood and something metallic beneath it. The kind of smell that lingers after systems fail. Power returned in uneven pulses just after 6. Lights flickered on, then steadied. The refrigerator hummed back to life. Somewhere downstairs, water dripped in a slow, deliberate rhythm. I was already awake. I had placed the metal lockbox on the dresser in the guest room and sat beside it most of the night, listening to the wind lose its confidence. When the house settled into silence, I opened it. The key had been taped to the underside of the lid. My grandmother believed in preparation, not mystery. Inside were 3 items: a sealed envelope with my name written in her hand, a notarized document dated 8 years earlier, and a smaller folder containing bank statements I recognized immediately. I opened the notarized document first. It was her original will. Clear, direct, specific. Primary residence and investment portfolio divided equally between me and Colin. The coastal property, held in trust, transferred solely to me upon her passing. No co-executors, no discretionary language, no oversight. Her signature was firm, the upward hook at the end of Miller sharp and unmistakable. The notary seal bore a date 2 months before her first hospitalization. I set the forged version from memory beside it in my mind, the softened curve, the altered clauses. It had not been a misunderstanding. It had been deliberate. I opened the envelope next. Abby, if you are reading this, it means someone has tried to simplify something that was never meant to be convenient. You were always the one who watched quietly. Watching is not weakness, it is patience. Trust documents, not volume. Love, grandmother. The final line was underlined once. I folded the letter carefully and returned it to the envelope. Downstairs, I heard movement. Cabinets opening. Colin's voice low and tense. I closed the lockbox and carried it with me. The office looked worse in daylight. Water had receded, leaving warped floorboards and a fine gray film across the desk. Papers lay fused together in uneven stacks. The forged will was no longer legible. Ink had bled into watercolor shadows. The notary stamp had peeled from the page entirely. My father stood near the window, staring at the damage. Insurance adjusters would arrive later. Campaign staff had already begun calling about unforeseen weather challenges. The phrasing would be careful. He turned when he saw me. "We'll handle this," he said automatically. I placed the lockbox on the desk. He glanced at it once, dismissive. "That's old paperwork," he said. "Yes," I replied. Colin entered behind him, sleeves rolled, irritation visible in the set of his shoulders. "We have bigger problems," he said. "Reporters are already posting storm photos. The porch banners halfway down the street." I opened the lockbox and removed the notarized will. The paper was dry, unmarked. I laid it flat on the desk between us. My father didn't touch it at first. Colin stepped closer. "What is that?" he asked. "The original," I said. My father's jaw shifted almost imperceptibly. "There is no original," he said. "We updated it." 8 years ago, I replied. Silence moved through the room differently now. Colin reached for the document. His eyes scanned the page. The equal division, the sole transfer of the coastal property. "That's outdated," he said quickly. "It was filed," I answered, "with the county." My father looked up sharply. "That's not possible." "It is." The storm had stripped away more than shingles. Water had done what confrontation had not. It had erased the revised version beyond recovery. Down the hallway, a phone rang. Then another. My father straightened. "You don't understand the pressure we're under," he said quietly. "This campaign is not relevant," I replied. Colin's voice sharpened. "You're going to make this public? After everything Dad's built?" I met his eyes. "I'm going to make it accurate." I gathered the notarized will and returned it to the folder. "I'll be contacting the probate attorney this morning," I said. "You're not thinking clearly," Colin added, almost reflexively. Since the injury, I did not respond. In the Coast Guard, when a vessel lists under pressure, you don't argue with the sea. You secure what can be secured and let physics expose the rest. By 9 a.m., 2 local reporters had returned to photograph storm damage. They lingered near the front walk, lenses angled toward broken windows and splintered trim. One of them recognized me from the night before. "Rough evening," she said. "Yes," I answered. She glanced past me toward the office. "There's talk about paperwork," she added carefully. "Estate issues?" I did not elaborate. "I've retained counsel," I said. "The correct documents will be filed." She nodded once. Inside, my father's campaign manager arrived, already rehearsing statements about resilience and rebuilding. By noon, the forged will, what remained of it, had been photographed by insurance assessors. The blurred signatures, the peeling seal, the mismatched dates. Ink does not negotiate once dissolved. Political allies began calling less frequently by mid-afternoon. Colin stopped offering commentary. My father remained in the office, speaking in lowered tones to someone I could not hear. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse him in front of staff or neighbors. I filed the original will with the county clerk that afternoon. Forgery is not a private misunderstanding. It is a matter of record. By evening, the porch looked different. The flag had been taken down. The ferns lay in broken green arcs across the yard. The banner was gone. The house no longer resembled a brochure. It resembled a structure that had survived weather. My limp remained unchanged. But when I crossed the front yard to my car, no one called it fragility. Silence had shifted ownership, and this time, it belonged to me. The calls stopped by Thursday. Not entirely, just the ones that mattered to him. The campaign manager came less often. When he did, he no longer stood in the center of the room. He stayed near the doorway, voice lowered, posture careful. The language shifted from momentum to assessment. "Optics," I heard him say once. "We need to evaluate exposure." Exposure. My father's office windows had been boarded temporarily. The wood made the room smaller, airless. Without natural light, everything inside looked flatter. Paper stacks sorted into salvageable and ruined piles. The ruined pile was larger. I moved through the house without asking permission. Insurance adjusters had finished their documentation. Photographs taken, notes recorded, measurements exact. They had also photographed the desk, the water line on the wall, the dissolved documents. One of them asked, "Was anything legally sensitive stored below desk level?" My father answered before I could. "Just drafts." The adjuster made a neutral mark on his clipboard. By Friday morning, a local columnist published a short piece about storm complications and estate clarification. It did not accuse. It did not defend. It simply listed dates. Dates have weight. The original will had been recorded with the county 8 years ago. The revised document, now partially destroyed, bore a notary seal dated after my grandmother's hospitalization. The notary's commission number, once visible, had blurred but not disappeared entirely in photographs. The probate attorney I contacted did not speak in outrage. He spoke in procedure. "Forgery allegations require formal review," he said. "We will request notary logs." Logs do not soften under pressure. Colin stopped mentioning my injury. He avoided the reporters who began waiting intermittently at the end of the driveway. Their questions grew more specific. "Were you aware of discrepancies before the storm? Has an ethics complaint been filed?" He learned quickly that silence offered him more protection than explanation. My father tried one final time. It was late afternoon. The house was quieter than it had been in years. The campaign volunteers had removed the remaining signage from the yard. He found me on the back porch, where wind had splintered the railing. "You could have handled this privately," he said. "I am," I replied. He looked older in daylight, not fragile, just less certain. "You don't understand what this costs," he continued. "I do," I said. The difference between us was not knowledge, it was priority. He studied my face, searching for something: anger, satisfaction, hesitation. I offered none. "I never meant to exclude you," he added. "Intent does not alter ink." I did not argue. I did not recount the office conversation. I did not mention the phrase "sign and smile." Instead, I stood. "I will not withdraw the filing," I said, "and I will not sign any revised version." He nodded once, slow. The campaign officially suspended operations the following Monday. The statement cited family matters requiring full attention. Donors redirected support. Allies expressed polite disappointment. Colin returned to his own work quietly, without commentary. No one called me unstable again. The limp remained. It did not recede with weather or resolution. It reminded me each morning of the ladder, the weight, the choice to hold position until everyone else cleared. Control is not volume. It is sequence. By the end of the month, the probate court confirmed the validity of the original will. The forged document was entered into review. The notary in question had resigned from her post 2 years prior. Records did not align cleanly. Systems, when allowed to function, correct quietly. I did not attend the final hearing in person. My attorney represented me. Documentation was sufficient. The coastal property transferred as written. I visited it once. The house was smaller than memory suggested. Weathered, salt-worn, honest. I stood on its narrow deck and listened to the tide shift against the pilings. Wind moved freely here, uncurated by porch columns or campaign banners. My phone vibrated once while I was there. A message from Colin. "We didn't think you'd push it this far." I read it twice. Then I placed the phone face down on the railing. Distance does not require announcement. When I returned to town briefly to collect remaining personal items, the porch no longer held hanging ferns. The flagpole stood empty. The columns needed repainting. The house looked less staged, more accurate. My father opened the door himself. He did not comment on my leg. He did not ask me to smile. We spoke about logistics only, transfer paperwork, insurance timelines, nothing else. When I left, I did not look back at the driveway. The limp moved with me, steady and unhidden. No one followed. Silence, once used to contain me, now belonged to me entirely. I had not shouted. I had not humiliated. I had not retaliated. I had documented, filed, waited. And when the moment arrived, I had stepped forward once, cleanly. Tell me, have you ever chosen restraint over reaction and watched the outcome change because of it? If this story stayed with you, you're welcome to share your thoughts. And if you'd like to continue walking through stories like this, you can stay a little longer.